All right, I hope this is working. Hello everybody. This is Mr. Lau. Welcome back to Bio 20. It is May 27th. I cannot believe it is May. This is May, January, February, March. Yes, May 27th. Wow, can you believe it? Almost June. We have spent almost half of the semester in quarantine. This is insane. Anyways, you didn't click this video to hear me ramble on about that. You clicked this video because we are starting section 5.5 of chapter 5 of our populations and genetics unit. So the title of chapter 5.5 is on sources of inherited variation. So for example, like, these birds on this picture right over here, where did the different colors, the different hairstyles, the different dots, etc. all come from? Where do these traits come from? And for human beings, where did, for example, our eye colors come from? And where did the shape of our earlobes come from? Where do these traits actually come from? Okay, if you are following along in the textbook, it's going to be on page 153 to 156. Pretty short lesson this week and a pretty short section of the textbook. Okay, so let's dive right in. So of course, these are going to be the key questions that you're going to want to take a look at for this lesson today. You can pause the video and take a look at them. Besides that, we're going to move on. All right, so as a quick little review, we talked a little bit about the theory of evolution, the process of natural selection, and what all that means. Okay, so from our previous lessons, we know that as a part of natural selection, organisms that have advantageous traits are more likely to pass on their genes to their offspring via mating, and then these traits become replicated in the next generation. In other words, if you have an advantageous trait, you are more likely to mate because you are more able to survive, and if that's the case, your offspring or your children are probably also going to get these advantageous traits. Now, we mentioned it a little bit before, but we're going to be diving into what this question is, okay? So where do these advantageous traits even come from? Two sources that we're going to be talking about today, class. It's going to be on number one, the random mutations, okay, of DNA, okay? So that's going to be a big part. And then the second part is going to be the random combination of genes through sexual reproduction. So those are going to be the two main topics of today. Now, what are mutations? So mutations are going to be just simply changes in the DNA that cause a random trait to come up. So for example, a random trait could be a one eye for this particular, I don't even know what organism this is. I'm going to be honest with you. This was in a previous version of the notes and I have no idea what this thing is. A random mutation could also cause multiple legs in this chick or webbed feet in this chicken. What is happening in this picture? Random mutation could also cause differences in the two eye colors of the same organism. Okay, so that could be one. Or if you are into comic books and, the stuff like that, X-Men, random mutations cause their crazy advantageous traits like controlling the metal and stuff and telepathy and claws and stuff. I don't know. But anyways, those are examples of random mutations, okay? Specifically, they are going to be... let's get into a little bit about what DNA actually is. Okay, so remember that your DNA or your genes is your genetic code, and from that code, the cell reproduces these different traits and different structures in your body. Examples of things that your DNA codes for would be hair color, your potential height, right? Your eye color, the shape of specific cells, okay? So for example, my mom is 5 foot nothing. My dad is 5'6", and through a random combination of those genes, I got the gene that gave me 5'8" genetics. Thank you, God. Now, note, DNA is hereditary, meaning that half your DNA comes from one parent and the other half is from the other parent, right? So the sequence of genes that are in your DNA come from a combination of your two parents' genetics mushed together, and that's how you get you. Now, what mutations are, okay, if this original sequence of DNA comes from your parents, okay, we call mutations these random changes, okay? You might see it right over here, random changes in the DNA sequence which can cause new traits to arise. Then, because these mutations are in your DNA and we know that DNA is hereditary and you can pass it on, these mutations can also be passed on to your offspring. All right, so let's move on here. Now, we can categorize mutations into 3 separate groups, and we're going to focus on 2 of them. Okay, the first one is going to be on harmful mutations. So mutations can be bad or harmful because they can possibly interfere with normal functioning of important proteins for the organism and cause some problems for them. An example of this for us could actually be sickle cell anemia. You may remember that we mentioned this in chapter, no, not 8, that was digestive. Chapter 9 was respiratory. That was also muscles. Chapter 10 was the circulatory system. So we mentioned this in chapter 10, how normal erythrocytes or red blood cells are going to be these biconcave discs. That lets them travel through the blood vessels quite easily, okay? Now, if you have a mutation in your DNA, you can actually have these sickle cell shaped red blood cells. That is bad for a number of reasons, but one of the more dangerous reasons is they can actually block the blood flow in your blood vessels because of their weird and irregular shapes. If that causes a blockage in your blood vessels, you could get a lot of different problems, thrombosis, etc. So that is an example of a harmful mutation in human DNA. What about beneficial mutations? So these are going to be mutations that we could call good if it helps the organism live longer. An example, and this is going to be an example that's good for the bacteria, but not for us, okay? So a good or beneficial mutation could be happening in a bacterial cell. A random mutation could occur that in its DNA that actually makes it immune or resistant to antibiotics. And that is good for the bacteria because antibiotics can no longer affect it. It has no way to kill it, and the bacteria just live life totally fine, okay? Because of this, and remember that we said that DNA is going to be passed on to its offspring, okay? Or DNA can be, these mutations can and will be passed on to your offspring, okay? So for this bacteria that has this random mutation that makes it immune to antibiotics, okay? This mutation will likely be passed on to its offspring. What happens? That offspring has more offspring, and that mutation starts getting more proliferated, more common, and eventually all the bacteria will then also get this antibiotic-resistant trait. We call this a selective advantage because it gives it an advantage to live longer, and then the genetics of the population naturally selects that trait to reproduce, or to be reproduced, because that trait, because of this random mutation, is better for the organism to survive. If it can survive longer, right over here, it can also mate more. And if it mates more, it reproduces more. If it reproduces more, what is also reproduced? This advantageous trait. That gives it a selective advantage. Okay. Now, this is very good for the bacteria, very bad for us, okay? So if we have a lot of bacteria over here and some of them are resistant to antibiotics, they can kill most of the bacteria. However, because of random mutations, some bacteria are immune and they stay alive. When they stay alive, they mate, okay? And when they mate, more bacteria are created with these antibiotic resistant genes. All right. So how exactly do we measure the benefit or harm of the mutation? You might already understand this, but we're just going to put it into more specific words. Mutations are harmful if they decrease an organism's fitness. And fitness is a specific biology term where we use it to describe the ability of an organism to reproduce. Okay? So if a mutation makes it so that the organism is less likely to reproduce, we would say that it is harmful. The other end of this is also true. A beneficial mutation will increase an organism's fitness, meaning it is more likely to reproduce, which means we would call it beneficial. So let's just take a look at an example over here, right? This is a person spraying some pesticide, and this pesticide could possibly kill this housefly. However, a mutation in the DNA of a housefly can cause the pesticide to have wow, my mouse is going everywhere here, can cause the pesticide to have no effect on the cells of the housefly, right? Meaning the housefly can live perfectly fine. Would this mutation be harmful or beneficial? We would say that this is actually a beneficial mutation for the housefly because it is more likely to reproduce because it's not dying because of the pesticide. Is it beneficial for us? Probably not, because we don't really like houseflies. Now, what about this one? Is this mutation a harmful or beneficial or a neutral mutation? So this is something called hypertrichosis, which is also called werewolf syndrome, okay? And it affects a very few people, human beings. About 50 cases have been documented since the Middle Ages. Now, what happens is people with hypertrichosis, these are the symptoms: excessive hair on the shoulders, face, and ears. So a lot of extra hair. And some studies have seen that it's possibly because of a rearrangement of chromosome H in the human DNA. Now, is this harmful, beneficial, or neutral? So a few different things you can take a look at, okay? So first of all, is it beneficial, okay? Is it beneficial? Well, if it was beneficial, we would typically see more of these traits in the population, right? For example, giraffes. What is a beneficial mutation? Maybe a mutation in the neck length of the giraffe. The taller it is, the better it is, and now all the giraffes have long necks, right? So typically, if it's beneficial, you would see more cases. Okay? Do we really see more cases in this population of human beings? No, only 50 cases have been documented since the Middle Ages. So that means it's probably not beneficial. Now, is it harmful though? Possibly, because if it's harmful, it might affect this organism's ability to reproduce. And only 50 cases have been documented since the Middle Ages. If it affects the organism's ability to reproduce, and our evidence is the few number of cases in the human population since a long time ago, okay, what do we say? It's less likely to reproduce, and it is harmful. Sorry, bud. But it is a harmful mutation, so that's unfortunate. All right. Now, mutation creates a variability in the population, or in other words, it gives you diversity in the types or characteristics of the organism, and this is going to lay the groundwork for next week's lesson that can actually help cause speciation or a formation of a new species when you get so many mutations that happen over hundreds or even thousands of years. All those different mutations combined together, you get a lot of different combinations of characteristics, like all these different spiders that have different colors, different patterns on their abdomen, different sizes, etc., etc. Once you have enough of those mutations, you can possibly get the formation of a new species. So over here it says one species of spider, the Tetragnatha, Tetragnatha, blah, 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 blah. Also, this should be italicized. Oopsies. Because of their extraordinary diversity of color, they have a lot of different genetic variability, probably a lot of different mutations in the DNA. Like, look at this one. It looks like a frosted strawberry on the back of that, right? And this could possibly set up the formation of a new spider species later down the road. All right, so what actually causes the mutation? So two different things here, okay? So we got 1 and we got 2. And environmental factors, okay? So for example, chemicals that are perhaps poisonous or harmful could change the DNA, or radiation, okay? Like for example, gamma radiation. Gamma radiation caused the mutation in Bruce Banner, which created the Hulk, and the genetic variability caused the mutation of his traits into making him a very strong Avenger. Okay, so that is one possible, gamma radiation. Or, right, another radiation could possibly be UV radiation. UV radiation from the sun, okay, can cause mutations in skin cells. And then those mutations in the skin cells could actually cause skin cancer, which we would say would be a harmful mutation for sure. So these different things can cause changes in the sequence of the DNA. Another one could actually be just spontaneous mistakes. You're going to learn more about this in Bio 30, okay? Bio 30, when cells actually replicate, because you and I didn't used to be this collection of trillions and trillions of cells. We used to be one cell, right? We used to be the combination of sperm and egg into one cell. And then over the period of, for you, 16 years, 16 or 17 years, for me, 27 years, right? All those different cells multiply and they make new copies of themselves. When they make new copies of their DNA, sometimes things go wrong. And then when things go wrong, sometimes you get mutations. You're going to learn more about that in Bio 30, but that could possibly cause, for example, take a look at this frog over here. We have 1, 2, oh God, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 appendages on this poor little frog here. Or you can have a person with 6 fingers, right? Count them. So like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So these could be just mistakes in the copying of DNA. Who knows? But these are the two areas where you can get mutations, environmental factors, or spontaneous mistakes in the copying of DNA. All right, so that is going to be the first section, right? So mutations can cause variability in the DNA of the organism and give you different traits, okay? The second one is going to be sexual reproduction. So sexual reproduction, you're going to learn more about this in Bio 30, okay? But the specific genetic process of sexual reproduction is when you get DNA from 2 different parents. They combine together to produce an offspring that has a keyword unique combination of genes. Where does this unique characteristic of these combination of genes come from? Okay, so let's break it down. And again, you're going to learn more about this in Bio 30, but we're just setting up the groundwork for you right now, okay? So when you, how should I explain this? Our body cells have 2 different types of cells, okay? One is non-sex cells, like your skin, okay, right? Like the skin cells on your body, or like the hair cells, or like the stomach cells, etc. They are not sex cells, okay? They cannot reproduce. They just make copies of themselves when, you know, your skin flakes off, okay? However, you do actually can make sex cells, for example, sperm or eggs. And each of those cells actually has only about half the genetic code of your entire being, okay? So you have 46 chromosomes, or 46 pairs. 46 chromosomes in 23 pairs. My bad, okay? And then when you make sex cells, okay, your 46 chromosomes actually gets halved, and then it splits into 23 chromosomes in the egg or in the sperm. So it only has half of your DNA. When these sex cells are produced, whatever half of the DNA that this egg or this sperm actually gets, the choice of the DNA that's actually allocated into this half is completely random. Okay, so no 2 sex cells of the same person, right, has the exact same DNA. There are no 2 sperm that are identical to each other. They might have some similarities, but they cannot be identical because of things you'll learn in Bio 30. Okay, it's called crossing over of DNA. Each sex cell has a unique DNA. Now, because each sex cell has unique DNA, every single time sex cells actually combine to join to form offspring, we call it the zygote, okay? The combination is always going to be unique. If each sex cell is unique and then these sex cells combine, every single time they combine, the combination is also always going to be unique. So this is why, for example, let's move on to this right here. So these cute little puppies, as well as these 2 siblings, they come from, these puppies come from the same parent, and these 2 siblings over here in the bottom right also come from the same parent. Are they exactly the same? No, they are not. Why? Well, even though they came from the same parent, because each parent has sex cells that are different from each other, and then when they join, the 2 sex cells join, the combination is also always going to be unique. The offspring are also going to be unique. Take a look. Black fur, brown fur all over, brown fur, some parts of there, right? Oh, wow, these dogs are so cute. Okay, and then, for example, you might have a sibling, okay, and you 2 might have similarities, but more likely than not, you 2 also have incredible differences, right? My brother is 5'7", I'm 5'8", right? He did, what's a genetic variability between my brother and I? We have different shoe sizes, that's one thing. He has thinner hair, I have thicker hair. right? And, you might see some differences in physical traits between you and your sibling as well. You two are related because you have the same parents, but because of the uniqueness of the combination of DNA as well as the uniqueness of the DNA itself in the sex cells, you are going to be a unique person. Now, of course, when you get to Bio 30, we can talk more about what about identical twins? What about fraternal twins, etc.? You'll learn more about that in Bio 30, okay? Whatever. Now, sexual reproduction, we are focusing on genetic variability for populations, which is why we are focusing on asexual reproduction. We can compare this to asexual reproduction, okay? So asexual reproduction is basically when the parent makes a clone of itself. Okay, it produces an offspring that it is identical to itself. Okay, when this happens, every single organism or individual in that population is exactly the same. That is asexual reproduction. Sexual reproduction, on the other hand, produces way more variability in the offspring. Okay. Again, why? The uniqueness of each sex cell and the uniqueness of the combinations of these sex cells. Why is that actually important? Okay, number one, we know it makes more variation. Number two, because of this, there's actually also a greater chance of mutation, which can actually produce new traits because of the process of sexual reproduction and the uniqueness of the combinations, because of mainly the genetic. Mainly because of these two traits, we get right over here more adaptability to a changing environment, which can cause an increase in the survivability of that organism in a changing environment. Take a look at the example on the right side over here, okay? So, asexual reproduction, I'm just going to go like this so I can... Okay. Asexual reproduction has created these cloned potatoes. Every single one of these potatoes is the same. Sexual reproduction has caused a diversity of potatoes that have some traits that are similar to each other, but for the most part are very different. Now, when farmers plant different potatoes, right, sometimes they can be hit with something called a potato blight. Whoa. A potato blight is basically like a disease that can kill the potato. Now, take a look at these cloned potatoes. It just so happens to be that these cloned potatoes are all weak to the blight. What happens? The blight affects every single one of these potatoes, and guess what? You have no potatoes. Sadness, okay? Now, take a look at over here, the diverse potatoes. Some of these potatoes, yes, are actually the weak potatoes, right? Some of them can be affected by the blight. And so what happens, of course, the blight comes in, it affects the potato, it is diseased, and then, wow, those potatoes die off. However, because of the genetic variability and the differences in traits because of sexual reproduction, some potatoes actually survive. Why? Well, they had unique DNA, unique traits that made them strong against the blight. Because of that, they are able to survive. You have a beautiful potato crop, you have potatoes for days, and you are living in happiness. So, that is the lesson. Oh, wait, no, there's a last picture. Okay, last picture to sum it up, okay? Asexual reproduction, offspring are exactly the same as the parents. Take a look. White and blue DNA, the exact same. It looks like I'm drawing glasses. Okay, I'm going to stop doing that. Okay, but sexual reproduction, because of the uniqueness of the combinations of the DNA, two sex cells over here, when they combine, can produce many different combinations of the DNA. Okay, so how did we figure this out? Well, stick around for Bio 30. Haha, I love the genetics part of Bio 30, actually. It's one of my favorite units. Okay, so because of that, you have a lot of differences in the DNA, differences in variability, differences in ability to survive, different traits, etc. And that is how you were born. Okay, class, that's it for the lesson today. I've rambled on long enough. Okay, please take a look at the online quiz. And a short lesson this week, we're going to get back into, I think, the last part of the genetics part of Bio 20. Next week, see you then. Bye-bye. Mr. Lau out. Signing off. Okay, that's it.